Hey guys, it's Rebecca from alltapestrycrochet.com, and this is the 7th video of the Tapestry Crochet for Beginners series. In this video, I'm going to go over the basics of reading a pattern. A few questions that I get quite frequently are, how do you know how many rounds you should do in your base? How do you adjust a pattern for the body of the bag so it fits the base? And what do you do when the number of stitches in the base and the number of stitches in the pattern don't match up? I originally wanted to go over those questions in this video, but I thought it might make it too lengthy, so I'll be going over the answers for those questions in a later video. Before I get started, I know I keep mentioning bases, but of course for some projects you might not need a base, but you still need to know how to read a pattern, so let's go ahead and get started. Patterns are read from right to left and from bottom to top. Each one of these circles here represents a stitch, either a regular single crochet stitch or a modified single crochet, and each row of circles represents a round. So this would be round 1, round 2, round 3, and so on. This is a pattern that uses a regular single crochet stitch. With a regular single crochet stitch, a stitch in any round will be slanted slightly to the right of the stitch below it. Therefore, the stitches are staggered. So when you see a pattern like this, where no one point lines up directly on top of the point below it, you know that this pattern was made to be used with a normal single crochet stitch. Now, since we know that regular single crochet stitches are offset slightly to the right of the stitches in the previous round, we know that X here will be done into A, since X is slightly offset to the right of stitch A. Let's say you chose stitch A here as the first stitch of your first round. In that case, X here would be the first stitch of round 2, the orange one would be the first stitch of round 3, the white one would be the first stitch of round 4, and so on. In other words, the first stitch of the round does not follow a straight vertical line, it follows a straight diagonal line. The first stitch of the round will always fall within this diagonal line here. This is a pattern that uses a modified single crochet stitch. If you've already seen the video on how to do a modified single crochet, you'll know that when you do a modified single crochet, the stitches will line up directly on top of each other. And that's what we see here in the pattern. All of the circles are lined up directly on top of each other in a straight vertical line. So when the stitches in the pattern line directly on top of one another, the pattern was made to be completed with a modified single crochet. If we chose this stitch here as the first stitch of round 1, the one directly on top of it would be the first stitch of round 2, this would be the first stitch of round 3, round 4, round 5, and so on. Speaking of the first point of the round, how do you know which point of the graph is the first point? And how do you know which row is round 1? How do you really know where to start? The truth is, tapestry crochet is a very adaptable method. You could choose any point as your starting point, and any round can be your round 1. For me, I like to choose a point that's easy to recognize. For this pattern here, I would probably choose this point here as my starting point, just because the spiral shape here is so recognizable. Choosing a good point can be helpful when it comes time to switching rounds, especially if you're not using a stitch marker, just because it'll be easier to recognize once you've gotten to the end of the round. Those are the absolute basics behind reading a pattern. There's still a lot more to learn about the technicalities of actually using a pattern. First, you have to know how to read a pattern, then you can learn how to actually take that pattern and apply it to a project. In the next couple of videos, I'll be talking about those technical aspects of actually using a pattern, including how to move from the base to the body of a bag, using 2 different methods for starting a pattern after completing the base, abbreviated graphs, which are an easier way to read and use a graph, and how to adapt a pattern for your project. In other words, how many times to repeat a pattern, how many rounds to do in a base, what to do when the number of stitches in a pattern and the number of stitches in the base don't match up, and so on. So that is pretty much it for this video, guys. This is one of those tutorials that you have to do just to make sure that everyone's on the same page and that we all know what is what before moving on to some of the deeper, heavier topics of how to actually use a pattern. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below. You could also message me directly on the All Tapestry Crochet Facebook page, or you could look for answers in one of the many free tutorials on alltapestrycrochet.com. I wish the very best of luck to you all, and happy crocheting!